Welcome to the Plymouth Social Vulnerability poster. Social vulnerability refers to social, economic, demographic, or health factors that may make groups of people less resilient to climate change impacts. Certain vulnerabilities tend to be correlated. For example, older adults are more likely to have a disability or be on medications that make it difficult to regulate their body temperature. They also may live alone more often than younger adults. Our strategies for adapting to a changing climate should protect these populations in addition to our natural and built environment. So who is most at risk to climate change impacts? First, people who may be more susceptible to negative health effects. These can include older adults, young children, pregnant women, people with disabilities, and people with pre-existing health conditions, as they are more likely to be physically vulnerable to the health impacts of extreme heat and poor air quality caused by climate change. Individuals with physical mobility constraints, such as people with disabilities and seniors, may also need additional assistance with emergency response. Secondly, people who may have more difficulty adapting to, preparing for, or recovering from extreme weather events. Socioeconomic characteristics such as income and race can influence vulnerability to climate change. Low-income people are often more susceptible to financial shocks, which can occur after extreme weather and which can impact financial security and the ability to secure safe shelter and meet medical needs. Social isolation can also influence vulnerability as it limits access to critical information, municipal resources, and social support systems. People at the most risk for social isolation include those living alone and people with limited English language proficiency. And third, people who live or work in vulnerable locations are at most risk to climate change impacts. These are people who live or work in historic or projected floodplain areas, urban flooding locations due to stormwater capacity, areas prone to wildfire, heat islands, or neighborhoods prone to power outages. Outdoor workers like farmers, utility workers, first responders, and those working in hot indoor environments are also vulnerable. So let's talk about some of the demographics in the town of Plymouth that might help create greater resilience strategies for social vulnerability or limit our resilience strategies. So in 2010, the population of Plymouth was 58,000, and that's projected to reach over 60,000 by 2030. There is a declining population of children and an increasing population of seniors, with 30% of the total population in 2030 being individual over 65 years of age. For income, the median income in Plymouth is about $84,000, lower than the town of Duxbury, but similar to Kingston and surrounding towns. 7.5% of Plymouth's population is living at the poverty level, and that includes households with a family of 4 with an income of $24,000 or less. And 7.1% of the population in Plymouth rely on state services for food. The average male income is 3.4 times greater than the average female income, and females over the age of 65 are the largest demographic living in poverty. Let's talk about households. 23% of households of persons living alone, and 50% of those were over the age of 65. 14% of Plymouth households are unmarried with dependents. Renters pay more than 35% of their annual income on rent, which is the federal recommendation is 30% of income on housing, creating a rental housing burden. For communities of color, there are particular racial and ethnic groups that may also be more likely to have certain social vulnerabilities than others. For example, Black and Latino populations have a much higher rate of asthma hospitalization than other groups. Heat waves and poor air quality can trigger asthma. 7% of the people in Plymouth are people of color, with a growing population. This is as of 2010. And 7.9% speak a language other than English, and 38% of those speak English less than very well. Only 3% of households have no car, and 79% have 2 or more cars.